Hello, welcome to this lesson on water in the nucleic acids topic. Now you might be thinking, why is this lesson in the nucleic acid topic? And the answer is really because it doesn't actually fit many places elsewhere. It's a bit of a standalone lesson. So nominally we've put it here, but most of this stuff you will have come across in other units of A-level biology so far. So we're going to talk about why water is so brilliant. Okay, that's the aim of this lesson. So what is so great about water? I mean, it obviously is crucial for life. You probably know a few things about water and its properties already, at least I hope so. And it's also hopefully going to explain why our friends in astrophysics are so obsessed with looking for water on other planets and moons and things as potentially a place that we could go, or potentially a place where life might already be, because it is just that important to life as we understand it. And you've got pictures here. There's been stories recently of news of water potentially existing on Venus. On Mars, this is an artist's rendition of what Mars might look like when it had more water on its surface. There's still apparently discoveries of liquid water just under the surface on Mars, and remarkably even on Mercury, that close to the Sun. So, question for you to have a little pause of the video and think about: how many contexts has water come up in so far in AS biology? Okay, can you make a list of all the places so far and all of your lessons so far in A-level biology that water has come up? Also, what properties of water make it so vital for life? Okay, so try and make yourself a little list and we'll see how well they match with what we're going to talk about next. Okay, hopefully you've done that. So mostly in terms of properties, what this importance of water comes down to is the structure of water. Now it doesn't matter what sort of organism we're talking about, whether it's us or an E. coli, you can see that if you work out as a percentage mass what we're made of, pretty much whether you're a bacteria or a multicellular complicated eukaryote like us, it's about 70% water. Some of the other ones are a bit different, as you can see. We've got far more lipids than bacteria because of course we've got internal structures within our cells that are mostly made of membranes, whereas bacteria don't have any internal organelles. And obviously as a percentage, their DNA takes up a bit more of their cells compared to ours, obviously, though we do have physically more. Right? But the point here, look, 70%, regardless of what form of life it is water. And ultimately it comes down to this shape of water. Now you don't have to be a chemist, an A-level chemist to understand this, but some of what you've learned if you do chemistry may come in handy here. Okay? This idea, now we've covered it before, is that water is a polar molecule. Look, due to this bond angle here, due to where the hydrogens are in H2O, we've got that 104.5 degree bond angle. You end up with this end being a little bit positive. Remember that delta there means a little bit, right? A little bit positive, and this end here, because of where the electrons are situated, is a little bit negative. So it's got this little polarity. Okay. Now, obviously, if you want to explain this using only GCSE chemistry and fall back on electron shells and shared electrons and stuff, then that's fine. You can use this explanation here. Look, we've got our water we've got our oxygen with its electrons. As you can see, we've got a covalent bond, so the electrons being shared there, which means that the proton in the hydrogen is sticking out. We then at this side we've got these electrons sticking out here, which mean that this has got a bit of a positive on the end. Now, of course, a lot of you will be A-level chemists, so you will have a bit more of a sophisticated understanding of how this has come to be, and you might be able to explain this in terms of orbitals, okay, in terms of the idea that we can't possibly know where an electron is at any particular time. We can only define it as a probabilistic area. The electron's somewhere in there. It's a probability density function. And these orbitals, and when these orbitals join together, right, they pull areas of charge from one area to another. Okay, and that basically gets us to the same conclusion, that one end of the water, where the oxygen is a little bit delta negative, and the other is delta positive. Okay. This means that they can stick together. The negative can stick to the positive, and there's that little attractive force in there, and we call that a hydrogen bond. Okay, it's pretty common that you've come up with in AS biology so far, but of course this means that water can form networks of these hydrogen bonds and basically sticks together. Okay, and that's pretty much what everything else I'm going to tell you and everything else that's on the spec comes down to. Okay, so here's the key points. We're going to go through each one at a time. We've got the idea it's a metabolite, it's a solvent, high heat capacity, large latent heat of vaporization, and this idea of cohesion tension, strong cohesion between water molecules, and why that is important. Okay, so let's go. First one then. Now you should recognize all of these. So water is a metabolite in many metabolic reactions, means it's chemically used in all these reactions. Now take a moment if you need to spot which reactions these are that you can see. And if there are any others, you can make a list of them, okay, where you've seen water acting as a metabolite. Okay, so do that in a couple of moments. And of course, we've got here, look, this is the formation of a triglyceride. This is the formation of a polynucleotide, so nucleic acids joining together. That's what this topic's all about. This is the forming of a disaccharide. We've got the formation of maltose there and sucrose there. All of these are condensation reactions, and that there, of course, is the formation of a dipeptide right between two amino acids. Okay, so that is a condensation reaction as well. So condensation and hydrolysis reactions you should be very familiar with by now. That is the first important, helpful attribute of water. Okay, now also another chemical reaction that produces water, if you think about it, that you should be able to spot, and it's actually a waste product in this chemical reaction, is represented in this diagram here. And here's the water. Now this is a little look ahead. Right, this is the last stage of the process of respiration, which is a year 13 topic. Now, if you're really keen to find out more, you can have a look at the respiration playlist on this YouTube channel and have a look ahead to year 13 as to what's going on in terms of respiration. Okay, but respiration produces metabolic water, right? It's another place that water gets produced. So that's the first one, as a metabolite. Second one is as a solvent in which metabolic reactions occur, right? It's very useful that lots of things do and some things do not dissolve in water in the way that our cells are arranged, okay? So what I want you to do now, pause the video and make a list of the things that dissolve in water and the things that don't. Okay, hopefully you've had a go at that. So which is bigger? Hopefully if you've done that correctly, you'll find that the list of things that do dissolve in water that you've come across in AS biology is larger than the list of things that don't. All right, the reason for this goes back to that polarity we were talking about at the beginning, the idea that ions in A here and polar molecules in B, so that's a carbonyl group there, look, it's polar, will dissolve in water because they'll still get involved in this attraction to one or the other of the ends of the molecule. Look, so you've got sodium here, which is positively charged, so the oxygens, their little delta negatives, attract there. You've got chlorine here, the hydrogens attract there because the chlorine's negative and the hydrogen's delta positive. So they'll happily dissolve in water. Same with this carbonyl group here. But when you get to this hydrocarbon here, so this could be the fatty acid tail, right, of a triglyceride, this one will not, or the fatty acid tail of a phospholipid, which of course the whole thing about dissolving in water with phospholipids is why they work in the way that they do. Okay, so this one here will not dissolve in water. So hopefully your list of things that do dissolve is a bit longer than the things that don't. The things that do are charged and the things that don't are uncharged. Okay, so that's water's helpful attributes 1 and 2. It's a metabolite and it's a very good solvent, okay, for anything that has a charge on it. Next one then, the heat capacity. Now think back to your physics, right? This is something you should remember. I know I've been using physics quite a bit in these last couple of videos, but it's important and a great subject, okay? And if you dropped it at the end of GCSE as fast as you could, more fool you, right? So this is an equation from physics you should remember. Energy transferred equals the mass times specific heat capacity of whatever the material is multiplied by the temperature change that you need to achieve. Okay, so you should remember and know this formula. Okay, so you probably did this with blocks of metal, maybe you did it with water, but we're specifically interested in the specific heat capacity of water for this lesson. Okay, and maybe you even remember it because maybe in a chemistry experiment you used it to measure how much energy was in a crisp or something else you could burn, that classic experiment. So here's a very odd question for you, right? A very weird question. You've got 5 litres of blood, roughly, let's say, approximately 70% of which is water. Okay? Specific heat capacity of water, which remember is 4,181 joules per kilogram per degree C. You might have seen that as 4.2 kilojoules per kilogram or 4.2 joules per gram per degree C. Right, that's the sort of unit we want to use for today. Water weighs 1 kilogram per litre. So the question is, how much energy does it take to raise your blood's temperature, to raise one human's worth of blood temperature by 5 degrees? I know I've made a lot of assumptions here, and there are a lot of ifs and buts and provisos that you could bring in. Right, blood's not just water, there's protein in there, so how much does that take to cook, and so on and so forth. Taking this data, work out, right, in a couple of minutes, how much energy it would take to raise your blood temperature by 5 degrees. Go. Okay, all done? Now obviously, that's a stupid question, right? But this kind of multi-staged calculation question is something that AS and A-level students are required to do on exam papers, and it's something that they struggle at, using multiple pieces of data to get to an answer. So for this, we would have started, I made this pretty straightforward. 5 litres times 70% is 3.5. So out of that 5 litres of blood, approximately 3.5 litres is water. Now, obviously, I know this question is only talking about heating the water, not heating the protein or the sugar or anything else, but so be it, right? This is a rough calculation. So we then take that 3.5 litres and times it by 4,181. That's the amount of joules it would take to raise 1 litre of water. Okay, there's a 1 kilo of water by 1 degree. So 3.5 litres of water by 1 degree. Okay, we then multiply that number that we get, which is 14,633, by 5 to get the 5 degrees that we need. Okay, and that gives us 73,167.5 joules or 73.2 kilojoules to raise one human's worth of blood, at least the watery bit, by 5 degrees. Okay, now these longer calculation questions, some of that information might have been presented to you in a table, might have been on a graph, right, when you expected to pick all that out. Now if you thought that was too easy, and that was great, I'll give you a little extension. Right, given that the average wattage of a kitchen kettle is about 2 kilowatts, let's say, how long would it take a kettle to heat a human's worth of blood up by 5 degrees? And then if you want to go further than that, you can go, well, how long would it take a kettle to boil a human? Right? If you want to go further with the calculation, feel free. Right? Point is, that's quite a big number. 4181 joules per kilogram per degree C is pretty large. Okay, which makes the stability of your body, right, quite good. The fact you have to put 73 kilojoules in to raise just the watery bit of your blood by just 5 degrees means that you're going to get an internal set of conditions that are quite stable, right? And that's good. That's also true for watery environments. So it's one of the main sort of ideas behind why we reckon water was the sort of site of life evolving, because it's very stable. The deep ocean is very stable, doesn't change much, so on and so forth. Okay, the fact that we don't heat up and cool down keeps our enzymes from working too slow or denaturing. Okay, so the idea of the specific heat capacity being quite high is a very useful thing for the stability of life. Okay. On a similar note, in terms of heat, now that was specific heat capacity, so the changing liquid water from one to the other. This idea as well, latent heat of vaporization, is also another useful attribute. Right? It's quite difficult to change the temperature of water, but it's also quite difficult to break those hydrogen bonds and turn water from a liquid into a vapor or gas. Okay, it's quite difficult to evaporate water. And that's very, very useful, as this charming picture illustrates, very, very useful in terms of cooling us down. Okay? As water evaporates off our skin in the form of sweat, it takes a huge amount of energy with it. For comparison, right, water takes 2,264.7 kilojoules, right, not joules, kilojoules of energy per kilogram of water away. Now, I can't imagine that you'd be evaporating litres and litres of water, but it's a large number. When you compare it to something like ethanol, another liquid, it's only 838. kilojoules. Okay, so more than twice the amount, pushing on 3 times the amount of energy, right, of vaporization, right, from ethanol to water. So sweat is very efficient at cooling you down because, of course, as you know, if you overheat, your enzymes denature and you die, heat exhaustion. Okay, so sweating will take 2.7 times more heat away than if you were trying to cool yourself down by using ethanol, just as a comparison. So we've had a useful metabolite. We've had a useful solvent. We've had a very high specific heat capacity and a very high latent heat of vaporization. Okay, onwards. Now this is really the big one in terms of a lot of biology, is the idea of cohesion. Water's got strong cohesion between the molecules, which supports columns of water in the tube-like transport of cells of plants and produces surface tension where water meets air. Now that, as we should all know, is a pond skater. It's a creature that skates around on the surface of the water using surface tension. Okay, it uses the idea that its mass and the way it's spread apart is not big enough to break the hydrogen bonds in the surface such that it can sink through into the water. Okay, and I always put that picture in because in my first year of teaching I sort of naively, as a country bumpkin, basically said, yeah, you know, like pond skaters, and all the A-level students looked at me and went, what? Pond skater? So I hope that you guys all know what I mean when I say a pond skater, and if you don't, that's what I mean. Okay, that's a pond skater, and they can skate across the water. If anything's added to the water to break that surface tension, right, to disrupt those hydrogen bonds, then the pond skaters sink. That's why you tend to see them only in very clean environments, and they're a good indicator species that you've got an environment that's healthy and unpolluted. Okay, so that's one example of cohesion and surface tension, but where have you heard about the idea of cohesion and surface tension before in A-level biology? There's a whole chapter that we did that relies on this idea that water sticks to itself, right, quite strongly. Okay, you should be able to get the idea that I'm obviously talking about the joyous world of phospholipids and membranes. Okay, lots of the inside of your cells as well as the cell surface membrane are made of phospholipids, and they only work because water would rather bind to itself than let uncharged molecules get in amongst the water. Okay, so just as a quick reminder, in terms of a phospholipid molecule, it's got this split personality, as you probably remember. It's got a phosphorus head and it's got lipid tails. Okay, the phosphorus head is charged, the lipid tails are uncharged. Okay, so the phosphorus head has got that phosphate group on, which will mix with the water. The uncharged neutral lipid tails won't. Okay, so you've got the water there, as we've already said, charged due to its bond angles, as we said earlier, which makes the top hydrophilic, water-loving, and the tails hydrophobic, water-hating. Now that's a little bit of a misnomer. It's not the tails that are water-hating. It's actually the water that would rather stick to itself than let the uncharged lipid tails mix in. But thanks to this split personality, you end up with a phospholipid bilayer, where the heads stick into the water and the tails stick into each other. And this is all held together, not by anything that the tails are doing, it's all held together by the cohesion between the water molecules. Okay, it's actually that hydrogen bonding and that polarity of the water that makes this possible. Okay, and also, right, as another place you will have come across this, both GCSE and A-level biology, you've got cohesion tension pulling water up trees. Okay, now the largest redwoods in the world can be 150, 200 metres tall, and they need about 900 something kilos of water, right, to carry on, to move material around their body, right, around their whole organism, right. So that means that they have to drag, right, almost a ton of water per day, 200, maybe meters up in the air. Now that wouldn't work if water didn't stick together, because as we know, evaporation from the stomata pulls water into the leaf. Those water molecules pull the water molecule behind and pull the water molecule behind, and so on and so on and so on and so forth. You could not do this with ethanol or oil or anything that didn't have this strong cohesion tension. Okay, it's only because of that polarity of water that plants work at all, and it's only because plants work that we're here. Okay, so right, that's how water moves up a plant. So essentially, water is absolutely vital. To return to the syllabus, here are the major points that we've gone over. It's a metabolite, it's a solvent, it's got a high specific heat capacity, It's got large latent heat of vaporization, and it's got strong cohesion tension between the water molecules that supports a column of water in tube-like transport cells of plants and produces surface tension where water meets air. I hope that's all clear to you. I know that's a bit of a strange bolt-on at the end of the nucleic acids topic, but that is the end of the nucleic acid topic, and I'll see you back here for new material next time.